My name is Scott Wynn. I'm with the Wynn and Egan team at Neo Home Loans, and I'm great. Rich Brecklin with Real Broker here as our real estate professional to share his insight on the Mesa market update here for April 2023. So, just in looking at where things are at, there's some mixed metrics in terms of whether we're in a hot market, a balanced market, a cool market, but overall, when I look at everything, it just kind of seems that we're more in a balanced market. So, is that what you're seeing as well, or do you have a different take on that?
Yeah, I mean, just with my clients and boots on the ground, I mean, I think we can all spin something however we want to fit our narrative. But just looking at as a whole, like some things may see seller's market, some may buy. I'm just calling it aggressive balanced.
Okay. So when you say aggressive balanced, what do you mean by the aggressive side of that?
More towards seller side in some aspects. However, just because you're a seller doesn't mean it's 18 months ago where you can put any price, put a sign in the yard and call it good. So it still has to, there's still like an asterisk. It still has to be, priced according in the market and still be, still show well.
Sure. Got it. That totally makes sense. And I think as we dive into each area of the market, maybe that'll come a little bit more clear as to why you would say it's an aggressive, balanced market. So let's talk about months of inventory, because if we look at last month, we're looking at 1.9 months of inventory. And generally, 4 to 6 months is what I would say is generally considered a balanced market. So 1.9 seems very, very low, and it's definitely a decline from the 4.1 months of inventory we had just a few months ago. So would you say that that's one of the reasons why you call it an aggressive balanced market?
Yeah. And then just seeing, just lack of inventory, really. There's just not a lot out there. And, homes again are selling at a higher rate than they were prior to. It's just, the supply and demand to offset the higher rates.
Sure. Do you anticipate that we're going to continue to see lower inventory like this going forward?
I mean, that's $1 million question, but honestly, yeah, I do. Just not so much with, your traditional way of homes hitting the market, but so many sellers now have a low rate. The home they bought for 394 in 2019 is now going to be worth, 545. So do they want to trade in, that lower payment for, are they going to be upgrading? So now they're going to be spending so much more. So I think if the higher rates are keeping those sellers from listing their homes, and then we're staying that low inventory cycle.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the low interest rates are definitely keeping people put where they're at if they currently own a home. I think the other thing that's really playing into this is just the millennials that are of age to buy a home and haven't really had the opportunity to, because it was so competitive a couple of years ago. It was really hard for them to enter the market. And then as the interest rates went up, it made it challenging from that side of things. And it was almost an immediate flip of a switch that made it challenging to enter the market. So we still have demand there, but we just don't have the inventory levels like we once had in the past. So definitely a hot side of this metric, if you will, for the Mesa area. Days on market. This is kind of interesting because generally what I've seen in the past is that when you have low amount of inventory on the market, the days on market, the time that a property sits on the market starts to decline. But we're not necessarily seeing that, even though the amount of homes on the market is declining. Their homes are still sitting on the market for about 73 days. Any insight as to why you think that might be the case?
I think honestly, just some buyers are uncertain and they don't feel that pressure like there was before to, hurry up and buy, kind of that fear of missing out. So now they've kind of have a little bit more breathing room. And so I think this is causing homes to last a little bit longer on the market.
Yeah, I agree. I do think there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that stems from what the media is telling everybody, right? I mean, there's all these fears associated with real estate right now that we might be in another housing bubble, or that a recession is around the corner. Interest rates are obviously higher than where they have been, although they've started to decrease a little bit, which we'll talk about here a little bit later. But I think all of that is keeping buyers on the sidelines, and that's why maybe homes are sitting a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I think some sellers are, maybe pricing too high, but more sellers are doing price reductions. So yeah, more homes are selling at a higher percentage rate than it was last quarter, but how many price reductions is it taking? We know the percent of list to sold price, but what's that percent sold to original list? So I think with sellers now becoming aware of, okay, I have to price reduce. So it's taking longer for them to get that right pricing and then maybe making their home more marketable to the right buyer.
Sure. So for those buyers that are maybe sitting on the sidelines out of fear or the uncertainty associated with entering the market, what would you say to them? Do you think we're in a housing bubble? Do you think that we're going to continue to see prices drop?
I mean, we've been seeing the trend of prices increase the last few months, especially when rates pulled back. So when I have to meet with any client, like, well, why are you buying? What's your timeline? And then, can you afford the monthly payment? It's, that's what you're looking at. I don't want people to get in the idea of they're going to day trade real estate, of they're going to try and sell next year. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to move next year, like, it probably doesn't make sense for you to buy then. But if you find a home that you love and you can afford the monthly payment, then I mean that's why most people are buying. Most people aren't thinking, all right, what am I going to get out of this when I sell it in 3 years?
Sure. Totally makes sense. And I agree 100%. I think it's not about timing the market. It's about the time in the market. Real estate is an appreciating asset. It has appreciated throughout history and it will continue to appreciate. And there will certainly be little bumps along the way. But we're definitely not in the same position that we were back in 2007, 2008, when we saw the housing crash at that time. I think we've already seen probably the worst of it. There was a small bump down and like we'll talk about here in a moment, prices are starting to head back up. Talk about closings. This is the big adjustment in the Mesa market. I always like to look for what's the biggest mover in terms of these different metrics that we look at and how is that playing in. And this is the biggest mover. It's up 35% from last month. We had 825 total closings in Mesa, up from 613. What do you think is causing that huge uptick?
I think the metrics that are being reported now, that lagging indicator of the results of that dip in interest rates. When I had seller or buyers get a sub 6 without getting concessions, and just able to take advantage. I think they saw that window of opportunity where, all right, rates dropped, now we can get in, and I think that's what we're seeing the final product of.
Got it. I think that definitely helped, kind of the small drop in interest rates. I think also just the natural seasonality of real estate, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people generally don't move January, February. People don't move during the holidays necessarily. And so I think that's why we saw a bit of a dip in the market, and we're starting to get into the spring, summer selling season, and people are just going to be moving more regularly, I think, at this point. So yeah.
Definitely.
So you had mentioned a little bit earlier that we're starting to see median sales prices go up, and we're up 15,000 from last month in terms of median sales prices, from 390 up to 405. And if you look at this chart, you're seeing that we've started bumping back up a little bit. So do you see that trend continuing, that we're going to continue to see prices go up, or any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, as of now, and I check daily the MLS, I check the data that's being reported, and inventory just continues to fall. So if we still have buyers entering the market, and with rates, I think people are just more accustomed to what the rates are, and they've even trended downward lately this week. And we don't have many homes. It's just the supply and demand, and we just don't. With the inventory just not being there, I think we're going to continue to see prices increase. Maybe not the same volatility that it was in 2021, 22, but at least they're going upward for sellers. So that should be a good thing rather than down.
Right. And I mean, pretty much every metric that we're looking at is pointing to a hotter market, right? I mean, months of inventory is going down. Days on market might be the only anomaly, although it's just kind of going sideways right now. Sales are picking up, home prices are picking up, and the sold to list ratio is also increasing. So you had mentioned that a little bit earlier. Sold to list ratio being how much do they list the home for versus how much does it actually sell for. In Mesa, we're currently sitting at 97.9%, up a little bit from the month before and the month before that. But again, kind of bottoming out and starting to increase a little bit. So any thoughts or opinions on that particular metric and how it plays into either a buyer or seller considering selling or buying?
I think just sellers maybe becoming more aware of, this is where my home needs to be, understanding this is not 2021, pricing it more in line with what the market dictates. I think we're just seeing more of that. Hopefully some more educated sellers when it comes to pricing a home, and realtors alike.
Yeah, I think the sold to list ratio can be somewhat of a weird metric to look at because we don't know the circumstances of the seller, right? And so somebody may have listed their property too high and it wouldn't demand that price to begin with. And so they had to drop the price in order to sell it. And to your point, I think buyers are having to get used to higher interest rates than they had over the last few years, and sellers are having to get used to the fact that they can't sell their house as quickly and for over asking price than they were able to a year and a half, 2 years ago. So just kind of an adjustment, if you will. And another metric in line with the fact that the market is heating up is seller paid closing costs. What we're seeing is the average amount of seller paid closing costs when there are seller paid closing costs involved is about $8,600, and about 45% of sellers are offering closing costs. But that is starting to decline, both the amount as well as the percentage of sellers that are offering concessions. So what's your thoughts on that particular metric?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it with my own clients where I had several in a row, got 3 to 4% in concessions, and then several following, there was multiple offers and they were unable to get that concession. And same with, my sellers where, we don't have to drop the price and give a concession just because the competition's there. But I think it's good that people are understanding of, how to combat the higher rates is, you can offset that, and buyers understanding where you have much more power in the concession for yourself and your monthly payment and life of the loan versus getting it for, so much off of list price.
For sure. There's a few ways to do that, right? I mean, you can reduce the price and for every $1,000, you might save about $7 a month. So it's not as significant as people might think. But when you start looking at how to utilize a concession from the seller to help reduce your interest rate, you can make a significant impact. And there's a variety of different ways you can do that. The two main ways that we're utilizing it is to do a permanent buy down or a temporary buy down. You can do a permanent buy down and buy the rate down, as it sounds like, permanently, right? So instead of whatever the market rate might be, you might be able to go a quarter or a 0.5% lower and use the seller's money to help buy down that rate permanently for the life of the loan. That's not really the strategy we're using a lot right now. Instead, what we're utilizing are temporary buy downs because they have a much more significant impact on the rate and therefore the monthly payment, but for a temporary period of time. So what we're looking at is like a 1-0 buy down. So what that means is that for the first year, the interest rate's 1% lower than the market rate for the first year. So you can have a significant impact on monthly payment in that particular case. Sometimes $250, $300 a month is how much you can see in savings over the first year. And the next metric we're going to be talking about is interest rates. And I want to share why we're looking at temporary buy downs versus permanent buy downs. We've already started seeing interest rates trend down, as you've mentioned. And the reason why we anticipate that they're going to continue to trend down is because of how mortgage rates are tied to inflation. Inflation is really a leading indicator of where we think mortgage rates will go. And as inflation went up, we saw mortgage rates go up. And as we've started to see inflation come down slightly, we've started to see mortgage rates come down slightly. And as the inflation numbers start to continue to come in lower and lower, mortgage rates are likely to follow. And so the benefit of a temporary buy down scenario is to temporarily buy it down for the year, get that lower rate for the year, use the seller paid closing costs to do that. And then we can refinance you next year when rates are lower. Any thoughts on that particular strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I did quite a bit. And then before all this happened, before the frenzy of using, seller's money to buy down rate or pay off PMI, a lot of different ways. It's, I think people need to understand like the impact of a concession versus getting just so much off of the purchase price, especially like if you're an FHA buyer. And then, with what you can do there with, lower mortgage insurance premiums and then, with the increase in buying power there. So yeah, I think it's an awesome strategy, an awesome tool to, make that home more affordable.
Right. One of the things we're also offering people right now, because we do see that there's still a bit of a window of opportunity. We have seen sales increase. We've started to see the prices go up a little bit. Maybe sellers aren't as willing to negotiate as they once were a few months ago. But I still think that there's some opportunity because of where rates are. And so one of the things we're offering right now is a certainty guarantee. And the idea behind it is that you can buy a home now before all the buyers return to the market when interest rates continue to reduce. You're going to have less buyer competition. So you can buy a home, have more negotiation power on the buyer side, but we'll do a no cost refinance as long as we refinance within 2 years. So we'll cover all the closing costs on that refinance so that when rates drop, they can take advantage of that and get a lower rate, but still taking advantage of the lower competition right now. Any other thoughts about the market in terms of where you think the opportunity lies, whether it's somebody who's thinking about selling a home or buying a home, and any additional thoughts there?
Just understanding why you're buying, what your plans are. Can you afford it, the monthly payment as a buyer? And just try not to pay attention to what you're hearing in big media. I mean, real estate's hyper local, so there's a lot more that goes on than just what you see in the news.
I agree. I mean, we've talked about it a few times, right? It's not about timing the market. It's about doing what it's right for you based on your unique circumstances. And for some people, it's a great time to buy or sell. And for other people, it isn't. And one of the things that we really work towards with our clients is looking at the holistic picture, right? Not just focusing solely on the real estate transaction, but also looking at how that real estate transaction plays into your bigger financial strategies. A seller right now, even with a low interest rate, might be able to sell their home, move to a bigger home if that's what's right for them, use their equity in their current home, pay off consumer debt like credit cards. Consumer debt has hit an all-time high. And so one of the ways that our clients are working with this strategy right now is take the equity, pay off the higher interest rate debt, lower your overall monthly cash flow, and get into a house that's more suitable for you and your family. So again, it goes back to every situation is a little bit unique. So, well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share your ideas and perspective on the market. And if anybody's looking to buy or sell real estate, Rich Brecklin is a great resource with Real Broker. We'll have all the contact information available as well.